which was a very kind of stuffy program, very computer science oriented, that I had 0 qualifications for, and I happened to get in. And that was like, it was my last choice, my backup to my backup to my backup. And it actually was a really spectacular accident that I got in. And so this is one of the first things that I made. This is like a really proud moment for me. It's not much, but it was the first time that I could make a design tool that no software out there in the world could do. So this is using how to use fluid dynamics to design stuff. And with this, it kind of embeds a lot of the ideas that I've kept on pushing and pecking at for my whole career. So from here, you can 3D print, you can CNC route, or you can laser cut, all of this. And it embedded that knowledge of the robot directly into the software. And at the same time, like something that absolutely blew my mind was that I didn't know that computers could see you. So this project, for some context, like 2010, this was like iPhone 4. Instagram wasn't even invented yet. And here at Carnegie Mellon, which has a really strong computer science department, interaction department, you know, I learned that like computers can see you and you can use that to talk with them. I kept on pushing at this idea of like, how do you embed the knowledge of a machine into geometry? And this was like another little toy thing that I did, a squid modeler. So you could play around with a squid and 3D print really complex forms. And taking another step further is like, well, you know, if computers can see me, maybe I can use my hand to drag around this squid around a 3D scan of my body. And I made this software tool that let you design, and then whatever you design could be 3D printed immediately. And because it was designed around your body, you could also wear it right away. And this project for me was a bit of a turning point. It was the first project that I had an academic paper about. It was the first project that got some press about it. And it was the first time that, because I took some really good documentation and I spent some time with the writing and presenting this, it was the first time that some accidental opportunity fell from the universe and into my lap. So I submitted this post onto, this was again like the era of blogging. So I submitted this post to Not Caught, and that got picked up by Gizmodo, which got picked up by Complex, which got me an invitation to New York Fashion Week to show this. So here I am making my nerdy little squid modeling software that, you know, has all these technical properties. And because I made a beautiful thing with it and documented it well, I got an invitation to this incredible opportunity that was like beyond my imagination. It was a good lesson to learn early about the power of good documentation. And then this project as well unlocked another opportunity for me. I applied to do a research internship with Autodesk Research in Toronto. And they had never hired someone from the architecture department before, and they were pretty suspicious because I didn't have the computer science chops. But like all good architects and designers, I had a portfolio. And so a portfolio got more buy-in than my resume and my coursework. And with that, I actually like learned how to do actual research, not from my PhD program, but from working with research scientists in industry. And it led to this follow-up work where I'm not designing something around my body, I'm designing something on my body. So this uses sensors, the same sensors that I was dragging with my hand around, but now I can detect touching with my body. So we can design, and then because we embedded the properties of 3D printing into it, we can export, and it's designed on a scan of your body, so you can just wear it immediately. So this was another pattern, like make a tool, write a paper about it, make a tool that doesn't exist, write a paper about it for scientific audiences, engineering audiences, and then make something really cool that no one else could do because no one else had this tool. And that was really neat for me. You know, this process was another unexpected opportunity for developing this system for detecting touch on the skin. That also led to a patent, which I didn't get by accident, but I didn't anticipate ever having a patent, ever being an inventor, an official inventor. So that was a really, really cool experience that I wasn't expecting. And then all along, I had been working with robots in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is known for its steel. It's a steel city, but actually it's the North American capital of robotics. There's like more roboticists per capita there than anywhere else in North America. And even the artists are roboticists there. And so I had been playing around with friends, building these systems to do more interactive control for machines. You know, taking these machines that are designed for automation and reformatting them for interaction. And so at this point, I'm like midway into my PhD. I have this project where I'm designing something around the body, designing something on the body, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll just use a robot to design and then fabricate something on my body. And that will be like the perfect 3-act play for my PhD dissertation. I'll get it done and submit it, and everyone will cheer. And I had this opportunity to do an artist residency at Pier 9. They had a big giant robot. Carnegie Mellon wouldn't let me do this with their facilities. So I had to go to San Francisco and Pier 9 to do this. And this is like some debugging that I'm doing. So this robot is tracking what I'm holding, and I'm debugging my software to see if like the movement is good enough. Because like this big piece of machine is going to be inches away from me, fabricating something on me. It needs to work. And what happened was, kind of by accident, a film crew was wandering around Pier 9, and they saw me debugging this, and then they said, like, we'll use it for an interview. And they shot this. Passionate about implementing better ways to communicate. For a long time, industrial robots have been the culprit of automation. Basically, all we need to automate. Now, using these tools to enhance net given the maximum is very exciting. Industrial robots are really fantastic. We put a different tool and then you also thing. So in the morning, we can do software painting. It's highly powerful. Another thing that I'm working towards is finding ways to bring this machine factories into my environments. So construction places, there's chance for unpredictable objects for people to move into the to give us robot eyes so that we can actually see and see our images. If I'm wearing these motion capture markers, those recognize doesn't have a moving space. Now it's looking at the machine, we want to understand our intention. If you get things very soon, how to do things with just a couple of minutes. And so that's a pretty epic video, right? And it was my debug code, right? This isn't the project I wanted to do. I was just sort of testing out some code. And what happened is that video made the rounds on the internet. So it was a Vimeo staff pick. It got picked up by National Geographic, the Science Channel, Wired. It sort of kind of went like for our like little community and went kind of crazy. And what I didn't realize at the time, but what the internet, what the world saw is like, for me, I'm like debugging this robot, and what they saw was this, right? Yeah. They saw this as like, whoa, this thing is about to crush this guy. And that relationship between how I'm moving and how the robot's moving, that's something that I had to like look back at what people were seeing, step over their objective view for it to really understand that, like, oh, there's something really interesting here. And like this next slide is a complete just like side note anecdote, but it was really cool. So 2 months ago, I get a text message from my father-in-law who's in Colombia, and he sent me this. And it's like the Science Channel syndicated version. It's the best Spanish I've ever spoken because it's all dubbed. But like that was like a really cool thing to again, like I was not thinking that this would like air in Colombia 6 years, 7 years later. But the result of this, like the result of doing work that is no one else is doing, putting it out onto the internet, is that you get these amazing opportunities that fall from the sky. And so I got an invitation to exhibit at the Design Museum when it was reopening its very first exhibition in this new building that they did, where to take this thing that was like done in a lab and make it so that a bunch of people can do it. And the way that that works, just like if you ever get a crazy opportunity that you have no idea how you're going to be able to pull it off in the time or the budget that you say, you just say yes. Yeah, I can do it. And then you hang up, you like scream into a pillow, and then you figure it out after. And I was really fortunate enough that I had an amazing support system around me through the Studio of Creative Inquiry and Carnegie Mellon. They helped me form an LLC, get a lawyer, get business insurance, because this was going into a public space as well. I hired my first employees for this and really sold up very, very quickly on how to run a design firm. On a shoestring budget, and this also there was from the first cold call that I got from the curator to the opening was 4 months, and so we had to basically reinvent all of the software and all the tech to work with a crowd of people rather than an individual person. So that was a crazy experience, and it also opened up a lot of amazing opportunities from that. You know, with some notoriety from British outlets, got me some more invitations for Europe-centric opportunities. And a year later, the World Economic Forum called me up. I had brought on ADB as a sponsor for the Design Museum, and ADB was working with the World Economic Forum and wanted an exhibition down in China. And the funny story about this is like they actually wanted the same one that was in the Design Museum. And so we worked for months to spec that out and bring that out. And then the venue said that the robot was too big for the floor and that they wanted on the nice floors. And so with 8 weeks to go, I had to completely scramble and figure out what we could do in that time. And so I asked for a ridiculous amount of number of robots, and ADB said yes. And I was like, I should have asked for more. And this uses the same technology. It's the same exact sensors as that first little squid that's tracking my hands. This is just a bunch of old Xbox Kinects that are tracking your body and then piping that for the different outputs. So instead of piping it out to a 3D printer, it's piping it out to a robot. And again, this is another opportunity. I wasn't expecting to be in front of this type of audience, which is all policymakers, all people that work in governments that are really trying to define what the next generation of policy to have that brings Industry 4.0, as well as sort of humane treatment of people and citizens at the forefront. But again, all kind of these unexpected opportunities. And at this point, I'm like two major projects down the road. I'm still not done with my PhD. I don't know how I'm gonna ever finish this like 3-act play of designing on the body, designing around the body, and fabricating on the body. So I decided to completely change my topic and like make my PhD for the work that I have. And then finally, I graduated. So that was a long journey. So from 2000, so I was basically in school from 2004 to 2017. It was a long time. But it was the time that I needed to really have these, crazy experiences. There was some really good timing that happened. NVIDIA, a technology company that builds graphics cards with any 3D rendering, you probably know who they are. They were opening up a robotics lab in Pittsburgh at the exact same time that I was wrapping up a PhD. And so a friend recommended me, and I started working for them back in 2018. And so this was an early prototype. You can see what was neat about this was that it was an opportunity to work with different types of robots. So anything that can crawl, scoot around, fly, they wanted to build software and systems to simulate that. And so this is like, I was trying to take my experience making CAD/CAM tools and try to bring that to robotics. So, this next like little deviation too, the original idea was that there was going to be an amazing robotics lab with all these species of machines that you have access to and click, and we were being put in a co-working space temporarily, and that temporarily lasted for like a year, and then 2 years. And then finally, I lost my patience and was like, well, if NVIDIA isn't going to build a robotics lab, I'll just do it. And so my husband and I, we bought a warehouse in Pittsburgh. It is 10,000 square foot warehouse. One of the amazing things about Pittsburgh is that space is really cheap and there's a lot of abandoned buildings. And so this was literally the cheapest warehouse inside the city limits. You can see like the building next to it is abandoned and burnt out, but we loved it, we were excited. And so this is like 45 seconds for 4 months of renovation. This is how we inherited it. And this project was probably the most challenging that we've ever done. We probably should have started by buying a house first and learn how to renovate that. That might have been a smoother transition. But what was neat about this project, it was like almost an excavation project. We just had to like get rid of a lot of stuff. There was a lot of cubicles in there and old carpet. And this was also an opportunity to learn like how to do commercial real estate, how we made another company for the building, how to hire a crew. You know, doing projects that are a little bit beyond your skill level is something that was really new to me. And so this is a shot of the top floor of the interior, where we have a workspace on the left side and a living space on the right side. And just like a lot of open, so this is designed with creative robotics and immersive technology in mind. We raised the ceilings, we have all these attachment points for sensors and robots. And then we also had a really nice living area. And one of the things that we didn't anticipate at the time is we had like a beautifully planned out CNC and fabrication room that we transformed into a nursery, because we had a different arrival after we had already signed the contract on the warehouse. And this is Maria Sophia. And it was really great sort of having this as a playground for her, as a playground for our robot together. Was a pretty unique experience. And then also by this time, a lot of what I've been working on at NVIDIA had matured into a stable software project. And so my friend saw this video and he made me the simulation of the robot. And this is the team that I work on, where we build next generation simulation environments for robots. And that's been able to unlock a lot of new possibilities for me as well. So this kind of brings us up to the present. So this is a couple months ago in Zurich. I got invited by Grammatio Polar to come to a residency. And if any of you guys know their work, they do this amazing, you can actually see some of the 3D printed concrete columns in the back there. For me, in the 2010s, it was super inspiring to see their work. That's what sort of pulled me into robotics, architectural robotics. And then it also pushed me into specializing, because I knew that I couldn't compete with these guys and the resources they had. So I had to come up with something different that only I could do. And so I've been able to leverage kind of what I've been doing at NVIDIA to, again, leapfrog through different tool chains into telling these machines and having these machines do things that other people can't, just because of the access to the tools. This was a part of a performance for a symposium, which is really good fun. But I had been trying to do this residency for about 3 years. The first time it got delayed by the pregnancy, second and third time it got delayed because of the pandemic. And so I was able to come to Zurich like the week their mask mandates dropped, which was a really nice way to shake off the cobwebs of the pandemic. So that, zooms us back today, standing with all of you here and kind of back where it all began. I'm here, I live in Miami now as of about 6 months ago. And I'm kindly being hosted by Shaheen in the Robotic Fabrication Lab, doing a residency there. So there's not much that I can say in terms of there's no real roadmap for this, but I thought I'd give, doing this presentation made me think about some principles that I try to live by. And the first one is to do what others can't. Try not to compete with people. Just do something that they can't do. And life is really nice because all you have are friends. You have no competitors. You just have friends. The other byproduct of that is if you're doing something other people can't, then you're automatically the best in the world at it. And that's a really cool feeling. That's a really cool feeling. And so I try to encourage that. I try to be clever instead of smart. And that's something that I think I learned from architecture school, from design school, that's missing in tech. And if you solve a problem or if you avoid a problem, the outcome is exactly the same. And so in tech, you try to solve every problem. And for me, I'd rather think laterally and just avoid the problems altogether and move on with my life. And then this last one is one that I have to always remind myself of, and it's to move with confidence and to move with kindness. And when you're an outsider going into a new industry, oftentimes you can't walk through the front door. You have to go through a side door. And it's your responsibility. It was kind of human nature. Like, to get in, you want to shut that door behind you. But it's your responsibility to make sure that that door stays propped for others. And even better, if you can bust that door wide open for others. And so you have to have the confidence that like you're good enough to allow others to join that space with you. And that's something that again, it's a work in progress, but it's something, a mantra that I try to live by. And I'm really, really excited to hear what Iván's been up to for the past 10 years. Thank you.
Great to see nice evolution from Robot Whisperer to Robot Ringleader. Story. Thank you, Madeline. Also
who managed this. Yes. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Eric, and the faculty for inviting me. This is gonna be a little bit of a journey through memory lane, like Maddie mentioned. We were lucky enough to be classmates among some amazing, talented people. So, the system shutting down. Get it back.
The projector, fix that connection. And we can just swap the screen and see the projector machine. The projector is round. That's the
Okay. So I thought it was fitting to start the project with one of my last projects here at FAU. Eric's project in Havana. And I was mentioning what was amazing of being here at FAU back then, the late 2000s, is the amazing people that we're surrounded by. So my wife, Kayla, was part of that. Andrew Santa Lucia, Maddie, George Valdez, William Virgil, all amazing people have gone on and do amazing stuff. So this was a project that was kind of like the starting point for kind of like my career, my development as a designer, as an academic, as a thinker, and so on. So it was one of those last projects. I can't even comprehend that it was done 13 years ago, more than that, 15 years ago, something like that. And then part of that collaboration in talking to Eric, we're trying to decide, and it kind of like made sense to frame this presentation around kind of like key projects that we developed over the years.
Iván, are you on Zoom? You're probably not.
No.
That's because they don't see your presentation. They only see that. So could you log in?
I don't know how to log in. Hmm?
Or can we log in? Can you log in here in this computer?
Do you have Zoom on this computer?
Yeah.
Can you open up Chrome?
That'll be good.
I'm gonna mute myself here then.
that working now? We're good?
Yeah, you talk to this.
Yep. Okay. So I thought it was only fitting getting back to this to start with the last project one of the last projects that I developed here at FIU as a student. This was design 7, I believe, on the Earth Studio. It was a project looking into a possibility for developing kind of like waterfront in Havana. Early introduction to digital tools, different kinds of communications that we're trying to do here. Let me see. And as you can see, trying to get into like tropes that were happening at that moment in digital design through like symmetry, how to deal with scale, how to build models, all of these things through like creating a sequence of sections. So we in the studio, along the side of people like Alex Lozano, Ray Diaz, and people like that, were working through these tools early on, introducing the studio. And then, as I mentioned, also like working alongside Eric for the Monad PS1 competition, which we were shortlisted, I believe, in final 3, something like that.
Not winner.
Not a winner. And then I just wanted to fast forward a little bit to the time. So after I finished my education here at FIU, a little bit of background, I come from a long line of architects, family of architects from Colombia. My sister is an architect, grandfather, dad, aunts, everybody. So during 2008, similar to Maddie, we decided that the recession was too much. And I was a little bit concerned with the connection of architecture, too much connected to the production of capital and like financial wealth and things like that. So I decided to embark to a trip to Los Angeles and then start doing my thesis there for the MArch. Took Amazing Studio. This is a project that I wanted to capture here because it's connected. It's also developed in Havana, Cuba, in El Malecon, looking into the relationship of familiarity, primitives, decay, and how that creates culture. So very much interested in the idea of cultural practice of architecture, how to create platforms, how to motivate people to come together and kind of like use space, but also kind of like push forward communities through it. So when I finished school at SciArc, and again, this is going to be a little bit chronological and biographical, I wanted to understand, and this picture has nothing to do with it, these slides, I wanted to understand a little bit of the fast-paced kind of like production of retail that was happening in China. So I joined RTKL for about 1.5 years. I worked with them in shopping centers and retails in China, giant, like half-mile-long projects. And then shortly after that, I was asked by the director of SciArc to come and teach a studio with Mexican architect Michel Roshkin. And I joined SciArc as a professor teaching alongside Michel Roshkin. And then I also started leading the Cecilio Tark office in Los Angeles. As I started teaching at SciArc, I developed alongside Hernan Diaz Alonso some of the most amazing studio projects that I had seen at the moment. We're really trying to think of issues of verticality, continuity, and challenging the tropes of digital design. And then on my own studios, I was trying to understand relationships of textures, form, massing, how to portray these things in exhibitions. So this is a class that I taught that is trying to challenge how you combine or how you disassociate texture mapping from the form and for movement. So early on, I was very interested in dynamics, movement, the idea of moving images as a way of creating narratives of a story that starts somewhere in a frame, but is always compared to the story before it. So it has not really an origin or a departure, but it actually has only a sequence of things that are compared to each other. And I developed some visual studies and electives around this topic. I'm trying to move quick because I do want to have a conversation at the end of this. And then alongside one of the most kind of like impactful projects that we developed at Cecilio Tark was the first one that I led, which was the Helsinki Public Library competition, which we got a prize for kind of like the first vote by the people. Somehow they were attracted to this project. I think Henry was part of this project. Henry, did you work on this somewhat? So it was an amazing project where we're again starting to test these things, understand how to draw these geometries, how to communicate with people these ideas. And one thing that we recurring along my journey through this is kind of like the people that we collaborated with. This project was a collaboration that we did with Barcelona Regional, Willy Müller in Barcelona. It was a commission to develop this bridge connecting Barcelona to San Andrea de Besós. And then similar with Barcelona Regional, we developed this park, which is Paseo Marítimo, which was developed in the whole Malecon area that was stitched to the bridge, and then like for a new development area that happened in the north side of Barcelona as well. At the same time, we were working in this project with Boeing, the airplane manufacturer. This project came to the office through 5D organization led by Alex McDowell, who's a production designer, an amazing about 2-year experience that we worked on this project, understanding the way that he was thinking, working with an airplane manufacturer in kind of like a retail space for them to be able to kind of like create these deals for selling planes. And what I took a lot about this project, not only is kind of like communicating and how to bring these things to reality, but the thinking in the 5D organization about world building, understanding of how you design through narratives and how you use those narratives to actually conceive a project. This project was built, I believe, in 2014. And then at the same time, working with amazing people like Florencia Pita and Jackie Bloom. This is a project that went into the Venice Biennial called Venice Zócalo, where we showcase some of these pieces. I was a designer for the team in this project. And then early on, kind of like an interest in testing the many hats that we wear as architects, or as a designer. So not only we provide a service, I was also very much interested in the academic part of this. I was very much interested in the curation part of this. So the One Night Stand, I was part of the 2 early projects, or early versions of the One Night Stand for architecture. The first one was a collaboration with William Virgil. This one, the second one, which you'll see, is a collaboration with Casey Rim, doing kind of like DIY, robotics, projection mapping, into like edge mirrors and so on. So it was an amazing experience where we developed a lot of relationships with people in LA, but also with a lot of people that were really from Miami, like Anthony Murray, Ryan Tyler Martinez, and so on. So this event is pretty amazing. It's an event that happened 3 times. It was only one night. Every artist got one motel room for one night, and you could do anything with it, with any kind of piece of art you wanted. But the condition was by the next day you had to be out. The second one was pretty spectacular. About, I think, 1,000 people showed up. The police shut down the motel like at 3 in the morning. It was pretty cool experience. Then this project in collaboration with Kayla Hernandez, my partner in crime, kind of like develop this new sensibility about architecture as a cultural practice that helps us frame who we are. It was a competition that we developed for the Museo Nacional de la Memoria in Bogotá, in Colombia. And I was very much interested in this idea of kind of like memory and who we are as memory. And this is a kind of like a topic that would continue to emerge in many of these projects. So shortly after completing about 5 years working at SciArc and with Zephyr Dark, I wanted to get a little bit of idea of the West Coast kind of pedagogy, East Coast kind of pedagogy and teaching academia that was happening. I went to work at Syracuse under the deanship of Michael Spix, where I continued to develop this sensibility towards cinematography, animation, computers, and so on. This was a class that I taught in which we were pairing film directors directly with unbuilt works of architecture and trying to use the depiction of architecture, the representation of architecture as an inspection tool to kind of like postulate what the architecture could be, what the building could be seen through the lens of a film director. So for example, in the left, you have Santelia combined with Martin Scorsese. On the right, you have Art Grant combined with Quentin Tarantino, and what kind of like emerges out of that, a pairing of both designers, architects, and film directors and cinematographers. Additionally, in Syracuse, I was teaching landscape studios, architecture landscape studios, second year, as well as grad studios, and we developed some pretty interesting projects in the idea of ground, what it means to create ground rather than manipulate ground. So these projects were developed in the Pier in Los Angeles, as you can see, working through patterning and so on. And also coming back to Miami, another version of the studio was run in Lincoln Road, trying to kind of like understand the pedestrian walkway that was Lincoln Road and how you stitch it together through these interventions of the student. This was a second year studio in Syracuse. So while at Syracuse, I became the guest curator, again, wearing these many hats, from working in a very kind of like traditional architecture office in Miami with my family, moving into highly speculative practice at Sephirot Art, teaching at a speculative school like SciArc, moving into Syracuse, which is kind of like a completely different pedagogy. I wanted to also wear a hat of a curator and understand what that meant. So through the guest curator program, I joined the Architecture and Design Museum in Los Angeles with Tony Murray. We developed many events that happened early on. This was the Three Ways project exhibition where we invited about 50 people to join us and present the work that they've done. All the work was kind of like projected onto these proto-architectural pieces as a way to see if the relationship between image and object could be kind of like altered through like combination of creating these kind of like clusters of people as you curated them. So these are some samples of the work that took place there and the events of that obviously after the opening and so on, kind of like photo after. Additionally, with the A+D Museum, we created the architecture play. The architecture play was a three-episode play that happened both at Kent State, at the A+D Museum, but also with Archinect with the Crosstalk series. We invited amazing people, about 20 people, to come join us for review, have conversations, develop interviews, and contribute pieces for papers that were published later on. This was an idea of kind of like motivating our faculty, our students. It also emerged as a class at Kent State that I taught as an elective, that then turned into the event later on. So this is part of the crosstalks. I'm sorry, I'm going really fast, but I keep up with me. So in 2018, 4 years ago, I was asked to apply for the director position at Kent State. Again, very interested in understanding the many roles and hats that we wear as designers, and with the education and the training that we have. I came to school, I applied, I got the job. The first thing that we did was looking back into the experience that we had with Alex McDowell, role building, kind of like mapping what it meant to create a future pedagogy and curriculum for architecture. We map all of these things and try to create these new connections and way of thinking about education through platforms, research, collaboration, emphasizing diversity, equity, social justice, and kind of like collaborations on different levels. So this is a series of maps that we developed early on to kind of like figure out that everything that we did had to be connected in many aspects. So we had to touch more than 2 of these aspects, and hopefully 3 of them had to be stitched together. So things that we develop as in my tenure as a director, we develop faculty through kind of like faculty and friends, pairing many of our own faculty or professors like Kent State with other people outside of the area, trying to bring people inside as well as pushing people out, developing kind of like visiting professors. I applied for a grant to create a bootcamp for high school students in underrepresented community, working with the LeBron Foundation in Akron, working with the Dash School here, high school here in Miami, with the John Hayes Academy in Cleveland, kind of create all these pipelines to make sure that we were well represented in the school, but also that we were offering the kind of mentorships and role models that students wanted to look at. So through traveling, we took students to Medellin, Colombia. We've taken students to Mexico. We developed a studio that kind of had died off a little bit, that it was called the Index Studio, in which we're pairing students in Cleveland with another location in the world. We did Medellin, Beirut, Havana, and Brazil, Curitiba. Tried to kind of like cooperate and collaborate with students in other areas to develop these new sensibilities and how you can combine these things. Competitions that we developed for the May 4th 50th anniversary of Kent State. The first time that the National Guard opened fire towards civilians happened in Kent State before in the protest against the Vietnam War. So we wanted to commemorate that and look at the memorial that was developed through the lens of the social kind of like events that were happening around the globe. We developed an amazing lecture series that together with the faculty kind of like brought new ideas to the program. And while we're doing all of these things, we also wanted to make sure that we were representing the voices that we're bringing. So we developed a visiting professor series, inviting Mexican architect, woman architect to come teach in the school. People like Sol Camacho, Rosana Montiel, Isabela Abascal, Loretta Castro, Gabriela Carrillo will fly to Kent State to teach studios, also take students to Mexico. So this idea of kind of like understanding the role of architecture and my role as a director to be able to expose students in the Midwest to all these different conditions, global conditions that were happening. Additionally, it was really important to build platforms and networks. So we invited some amazing, we have invited over the past years, many amazing people to do workshops on modeling, GIS, LiDAR scanning, urban design, and so on. So trying to get students exposed to much. I'm sure you're exposed to many of that here at FIU, and I really advise students to take advantage of all these amazing opportunities. There are 2-3 days workshops that really build up your expertise and help you kind of like understand. As we're doing this, Kayla and I were working in projects to test the things that we're testing, like how to design through narrative, how to design to things that were not permanent and so on. So this was a competition we developed for the Ragdoll Foundation. It was Pop. It was designed as a character that would move over time, change over time, full of character, but also full of qualities. We also worked on this, which is the Public Warehouse competition, trying to understand how to create fuzzy figures, fuzzy forms through discrete elements that were very simply kind of like put together to simple joints, but try to produce a sense of ephemerality through form that was either legible through one side or unlegible through the other side, depending how you were looking at it and the angle that you had on the piece. And later on, we developed the Little French House, another competition that we developed in which form was actually mediated through shingles, an old architecture technique of how to fuzz the form, how to kind of like erase a little bit of the qualities of the form, by looking at it through mostly interiority and the urban rather than the architectural lens. These are some details that you can see of the work, how it was positioned, and the idea is that as a character, the house could occupy all these little nooks and crannies around the city where it could just lodge onto side of buildings, under the bridge, and so on, and produce this kind of like domestic space. And then as part of the teaching, so you're keeping count as a curator, as a director, as a designer in highly speculative offices and practices, and so on. Also as a teacher, I was very much interested in what are the right tools to represent different typologies in architecture. This is a studio I developed early on, which was mostly looking at interiority and the relationship of interiors and section. So students develop a narrative to be able to produce these interiors, and the whole idea is that there is no context to the exteriors, how to remove certain variables within the work to be able to concentrate your efforts in simple things. So this was about interiority and section. You can see some of the student work. This one is by Nico Teofilactos, Ben Saibas. And if the lens is the thing that helps you produce architecture and generate architecture, then how you can start challenge the lens itself. If you're not looking through a camera lens, if you're not looking through an architecture convention, what are the new tools that you can use to look at architecture and your context, like scanner, thermal scanning, and so on. And then in the second part of the studio, again, we were looking into time-based animations. So all of these things are how you can incorporate that kind of like additional dimension to time. Yeah, they're playing, and how you can incorporate time as a way to produce a sensation of movement, but also in habitation that is very hard to capture solely through the still image. This is the work of Yuting Chang. I think he won some AIA national award because of this work. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about one of the last studios that I taught. This studio kind of like came together in collaboration with different parts. One was collaborating with the Ohio supercomputer. I don't know if Florida has these, but there's these amazing resources at the state level. And just calling the Ohio supercomputer, they let us install V-Ray in their computers. And we have access to like 3,000 cores of computing power, which allowed us to render things pretty fast. And the whole studio was set around the idea of transient episodes. Some of the presents that you're looking at are Adam Ayag, you're looking at Gregory Crutzen, you're looking at some gaming, you're looking at some film, Dogville by Lawrence Latier. And the idea is that through the pan, if the section is the thing that you use to depict domesticity and interiority, if the panning, the top panning is the thing that you use to depict urban ecologies all the way through building ecologies. So how you depict landscape and ecologies through a panning. So as part of the collaboration, we partner up with the Design Innovation Hub at Kent State that has this amazing cave, almost 360 degrees cave, where you can project all this work. Is purely unused. No one had used this work because you had to render, I think it's like 4 million pixels per frame, 27 frames per second. So by partnering up with the Ohio supercomputer, we were able to produce these amazing ecologies that took over this project, over this space for a period of about 2 months. They kept exhibiting this work. The students were tasked with the idea of creating ecologies that were self-contained, but contained in themselves every single layer to make them plausible and readable and believable in a way. So you can see some of the student work they had through this notion of creating ecology, like dark ecologies, natural ecologies, ground, infrastructure, architecture, and so on. So I just wanted to end, and I'm going again really quick. This is a quick glimpse of some of the projects that I worked on and my roles that I've done in my career over the past 10, 11, 12, 13 years working on it. This is the work of Diane Trepke, and kind of like trying to understand. Part of what I didn't mention is that all these studios early on had a notion of magical realism and Colombian, deeply rooted in Gabriel García Márquez, Isabel Allende, and these things, and how to understand magical realism as something that was kind of like that developed in a way of making sense of the pre-colonial and post-colonial realities of the region. So how you combine those two realities as a way for producing architecture through a lens of convention of looking at architecture. So the lens itself is the generator. So as you're looking at this, you're trying to put together two realities that don't necessarily match together, but the design itself is the thing that allows them to inhabit one single panning shot. So you would see the landscapes evolve from very kind of like natural landscapes into more developed industrial, to more infrastructural, to more architectural, to more domestic landscape. And the idea of the lens and the camera movement was kind of like extracted from people who suddenly passed away today, Jean-Luc Godard or artist Adam Ayag, that they look at the panning as a way to build anticipation for you to kind of like build what's coming next. And as things are entering the screen, kind of like challenges those preconceptions that you're building in the screen. So you're trying to assimilate or create assumptions or anticipate what is about to come in the screen. And you challenge as a designer, is kind of like to break those anticipations and keep your attention on the projects as well. And I think with that, very fast, I'll leave it there, but thank you all for listening.
Let's see around the formal conversation.
Yep.